Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. My name is Asher Holt. I'm a doomsday prepper, an engineer, and a man who believes in checklists. I live in a forest cabin miles off a retired logging road in the Maine North Woods. I built it to run on its own when the grid stutters, and to hold when strangers don't act like neighbors. The story you're about to hear starts before the outbreak had a name. Back then, the news called it a neurological event and argued over causes. I didn't argue. I hardened the place, logged numbers, and trained my hands to move in the same order every day. That routine paid for itself when the worst day arrived. This isn't a campfire tale with ghosts and clever twists. It's a record of systems, decisions, and people who did the hard parts without speeches. I'll tell you what I did, why I did it, and what it cost. So you can picture the choices before you face them, and the channel will stay free. Your support makes that possible. If you want more stories like this, hit like, share the episode, and save it to a playlist so you can find it later. If you're a radio person, say hello in the comments with your call sign and region. Title for today: I'm a doomsday prepper who fortified my forest cabin before the zombie outbreak. That's a mouthful, but it's accurate. I'll walk through the cabin, the power, the water, the perimeter, the radio net, and the choices that kept my people breathing. Let's begin with a morning before anything looked wrong right here. Morning starts the same way. Morning starts the same way because sameness protects you when judgment slips. So I open the log before I touch a switch, read last night's numbers, step onto the porch, listen for water in the brook, then bring the cabin online in the order I wrote years ago. Power is a hybrid because Maine's sun is seasonal and the stream runs strong until freeze. 6 roof panels feed a controller and a 12-volt LIFEPO4 bank. A micro hydro turbine rides a quick-release mount in the brook. A diesel generator waits to top off when clouds stack. I brush panels when pollen films them, check bus bar set screws by touch, open the combiner and read fuses, then re-engage. I walk the hydro line because a mink chewed it once and taught me to armor the last 10 feet. And I look at the tail race to confirm the flow hasn't cut the bank where it curves. Meters matter more than opinions, so I log array voltage, hydro amperage, state of charge, generator hours, sky, and temperature. The log keeps me from guessing a week later when memory edits to please the ego. I spend electricity like money on things that protect the principle. Lights low, radios on schedule, pump in short draws. A chest freezer runs as a fridge with an external thermostat and water bottles for thermal mass, and a spring house in the shade keeps jars cold without touching the bank. Water is honest if you respect gravity. Gutters feed white IBC totes on a timber crib. A capture box on the brook has shutoffs, a pressure brake, and a cleanout. Raw water moves through gravel and cloth, then ceramic, then carbon. If reports get bad, I add UV or a rolling boil and log it because repeating a treatment wastes fuel and skipping one makes you sick when you can least afford it. All plumbing must be fixable in the rain with a headlamp so the network stays simple. Hand pump fallback, shallow well pump for short runs, unions and shutoffs at every wall. Gentle sweeps instead of tight angles, and a bypass that keeps one leak from killing everything when a gasket fails at midnight. Waste gets lanes and rules or it punishes you. The compost trench sits downwind with lime in a sealed bin. Gray water drains by grade, never crossing drinking lines. At melt, I probe roots and reset what frost heave changed before warm rain turns ruts into rivers. Security is work you do when nothing moves. While coffee steeps, I walk the inner fence and tap posts with a hammer to hear who shifted. I inspect bollards at the neck of the logging road, check dragon's teeth in a stagger, and study the abatis wall of laid trees with sharpened branches pointed out. The kill funnel sits between a berm and stacked gabions, crushed stone underfoot so steps whisper. And it ends in open ground under the porch lights and the second fence, where a person decides in full view or gets turned. The gate is a sliding steel grid on a counterweight that drops fast. Wire works when it's layered. The outer ring carries tanglefoot low, concertina at knee height, and a top strand at eye level to break stride. Anchors get reflective pins for me and not for them. Alarms stay low-tech on purpose. Trip lines tug clackers made from casings and bearings. Steel pans on angle iron feet sing when weight lands. 2 flood circuits run to separate relays so a short in one will not leave me blind. Inside, rules hang on the wall in plain words. Power budget by hour, pump windows by day, radio quiet periods, and a 2-entry protocol. Roof hatch and main door are rigged with fail-safes you can test and reset, because a plan is real only if the tired version of you can run it. I touch the tool wall and do the boring part that saves lives, a hand on each outline, hammer in the hammer spot, crimper in the crimper spot, grinder guard set and spare discs counted, chainsaw bar flipped, oil checked, chain spun, and a quick fire outside so I know it starts when a trunk blocks the drive. Food is fuel and morale, so I stack it simple. Rice, beans, oats, canned meat, jars from better months, rotation by labels, oxygen absorbers in every tote, and no mystery packages because a clear label today prevents the wrong choice when a crew is cold and waiting for dinner to make sense. I do not hide numbers. The pantry card sits at eye level. A red pen marks low and drift gets attention before the next task starts because catching it early is cheaper than pride after a shortage. The radio table is last in the loop because air is both map and mirror. A handheld scans local. A mobile VHF/UHF stays low gain until I want it up. An HF rig runs near vertical incidents with a dipole strung low among the birches so I can talk to the next state without waking a city. Etiquette stays tight. Identification, a location radius and not coordinates, status in 3 words, and a line that tells anyone listening that this is not a clinic or a food bank. Approach with notice, follow quarantine. The gate stays closed until trust is built. None of this is glamorous, but it pays off when sleep asks you to skip one thing. The thing you skip is the thing you need when trouble shows up and insists on time you do not have. I keep the list, sign it, and when I hand the place to the next watch, we read it together, so 2 sets of eyes own it. Fuel stays honest when you track it. I log generator hours, treat diesel for storage, rotate drums, and know the cost of each decision when a storm parks and the brook slows to a crawl. That morning, before the outbreak reached the woods and rewrote our rules, everything looked ordinary from the porch. The brook ran, the birches clicked in a light wind, the panels warmed, and the alarms hung still. I took that as permission to start another quiet day, until the radio changed its voice. The radio changed in a way you learn to respect. Weather nets went thin. A sheriff repeater ran idle, then burst with clipped words and dead air. A medical channel asked for beds and blood and then cut mid-sentence. No one said zombies, they said neurological cases, agitation, loss of volition. City noise bled into rural bands. A shopping center security team tried to run traffic on a ham repeater, begging anyone with medical to stage at a loading dock. A grocery dispatcher kept reading a schedule no one followed. Ambulances called diversion after diversion like pinging in a canyon. I kept the log, time, frequency, content, tone. I underline tone because calm voices shake when the ground shifts, and tone is the first number that tells the truth. By noon, normal chatter was gone. By evening, new voices spoke like they were reading from flashcards made in a hurry. I went to the board and moved tasks. Fuel drums bumped up a week. Water treatment moved to daily pasteurization. Panel cleaning skipped to make room for perimeter checks. I pulled the heavy gate and tested the drop. Counterweight cleared in one smooth fall. The phone lit with a state alert that read like a blanket apology. Staffing shortages, stay home, avoid hospitals unless critical, avoid contact with disoriented individuals. The message repeated with a timestamp that slipped by 2 hours on the second push. That told me the system was falling out of sync with itself. I drove the logging road to the first bend and set a false sign. Road closed. Bridge out. The bridge was fine. The sign would buy time and redirect strangers toward an easier lie. Back at cabin, I stacked hedgehogs across the neck and marked the bypass in my head for later. At dusk, a ranger channel cracked and carried. A woman said her district was closing trailheads, volunteers sent home, maintenance suspended. She said they had 4 hikers sheltering in a vault toilet because doors latched and no one could spare a key. She asked if any tower operators were still logging wins. She didn't wait for an answer. Generators fail the week you need them, so I pulled mine out, warmed glow plugs, and set a 60-minute exercise. I wrote the hour cost on the drum in chalk so future me would see the truth in the dark. I cut the radio to scan and sat still. Out past the tree line, a loon called on the big lake and then fell quiet. The brook kept talking. A truck down in the valley climbed a gear. After that, the band sounded like a hallway after the fire alarm stops. Empty, waiting. I slept in boots, rifle racked by the door, mask and gloves on a hook. At 3:10, the state alert pushed a new line. Intercity fuel convoys suspended until further notice. I underlined fuel twice. By sunup, the road brought my first test of judgment today. I started with the road because roads decide who reaches your door. The logging spur came in on a shallow grade and widened near the cabin, so I erased the easy line and left only lanes I could close fast. I walked it with survey paint and a notebook, marked 3 choke points and 2 false cuts, then brought steel. Hedgehogs came first. I welded angle iron into X's with a 3rd leg and short chain tails so I could link a row in seconds. Each sat on skids so one man with a pry bar could slide them, but a pickup would grind and lose momentum. I stacked 6 across the neck, left gaps that looked wider than they were, and checked sightlines from the porch. Dragon's teeth anchored the center. I set concrete pyramids in the subgrade and tamped stone. A truck might straddle one, maybe 2, but not 8 in line, and speed meets a shallow ditch I cut and hid in leaves. Abatis slowed feet. I felled spruce, limbed them tight, and pointed branches out. The line sat offset to force a turn toward stone and wire. I kept butts on my side so a chain could pull the run in one arc if I needed workspace. The pile looked messy on purpose. Wire did what wood and stone could not. I ran tanglefoot at the ankle, concertina at the knee, a smooth line at eye level to break stride. The goal wasn't to cut. The goal was to trip thoughts and rhythm. Anchor posts wore pin reflectors only I could see. I built the gate before I trusted the fence. A steel grid rides a track with a buried counterweight. The latch drops into a concrete receiver. A steel bar slides behind that. If the grid bows, the bar holds. If the bar fails, the counterweight still closes and locks. I greased the track and ran cycles. Fast down, smooth up, lights face in, not out. I mounted floods low, angled to wash the ground inside the funnel, and hooded them so the woods don't glow. Outside stays dark. The master switch sits by the window. The backup hides deeper. Circuits split so one short can't blind the yard. Alarms stay dumb and loud. Trip lines tug clackers made from spent brass with bearings. Steel pans on angle brackets ring when weight lands. A spring clip holds a small chem light on each pan so night tells me which one spoke. I hardened the shell next. Windows got bars inside the frames, flat stock lagged with backing plates. Door hinges got through bolts with washers I can feel with gloves. The cellar door got a second latch and a 3rd deadbolt, all to the inside. A wedge lives on a string next to each frame. The bridge is the weak link, so I served it 2 plans. Plan 1 is a bluff. Bridge closed on a stencil board with contractor numbers and a warning about fines. Plan 2 is real. 2 deadman posts under the deck, shear bolts on the north sill, a chain to a hand winch, and a cut line where timber will part clean. Pull the chain, pop the bolts, the deck drops and jams. I worked the brook while I was under there. A small sluice sits above the bridge with a hinged gate I can pull by rope. Lift it and flow runs straight. Drop it and water nose is left into a trench I dug and shored with flat rock. If I need to, I can eat the bank under the approach and leave a wet sink that swallows any rush. Inside the fence, I tuned movement. I poured a shallow trench in front of the gate and filled it with pea stone so feet hiss when they enter. I scattered crushed brick under ash leaves where someone might crawl. Brick whispers sharp, gravel hums. Tools live where tired hands find them. A pry bar hangs at the gate. Bolt cutters ride 5 steps inside. tape and a marker sit by the latch to label whatever breaks. I wrote rules large and simple. No one runs the fence alone at night. No one opens a lock without saying why and hearing an answer back. No tool leaves a hook without a voice speaking its name. Break a rule, write it again by hand before sleep. I blocked line of sight from the road with cedar panels. From the road, the cabin reads like a storage shed, not a house worth a knock. I ran drills alone. Gate open, gate closed, floods, lights dead, radio down, generator up, water off, smoke in hall, move to cellar, bar the door, air monitor on, timer set, all by touch with eyes closed and then again with a mask. I added a kill funnel inside the yard. Gabions and a berm channel steps into open ground where sight lines are clean and cover is mine. A marked stake shows where to park a truck as a blocker. I walked the spur at dusk. The place read like a worksite with a mean streak. That was the point. You remove easy options and force choices where you are strong. I slept a little that night. Bands were ugly. Hospitals asked for quiet rooms. Police units stopped saying codes and spoke last resort words. I set a timer for a broadcast and wrote a loop that would say what mattered and nothing else. At dawn, I would test the net and keep working. At dusk, I would walk the lines and test them again. That was the plan. Plans work until strangers arrive and bring their plans with them. They came up the spur at noon, 2 men in dry suits with kayaks and paddles. They stopped at the bridge closed sign and stared like they wanted the lie to be true. I watched from the porch with the radio on my chest. The taller one waved, abrasion on his cheek, patch on his elbow gasket. The other scanned the tree line. "State your names, your condition, and your last 24 hours, I said. "Evan Moore," the tall one said. "Friend is Rory." We crossed the lake at first light. Heavy chop, no engines on the south shore, no houses active. We're dry, hungry, and clean. "Any close contact with disoriented individuals? Bites, blood, fluid, any fever, vertigo, confusion?" "No," Evan said. He glanced at Rory. Rory didn't answer. He kept looking past me at the roofline. "Bridge is closed," I said. "If you want water and food, I'll set a box by the sign. Take it and return to the lake. If you need more, you'll quarantine for 96 hours. "Water and food. We keep moving," he said. I used the pass-through because rules keep you from negotiating when you're tired. 2 jugs, rice cakes, peanut butter, a small med kit. I slid it, stepped back, watched them step forward. Rory hesitated, then took the bag. They went downhill, kayaks bouncing light. They camped 200 yards down where the spur widens into gravel. I saw an orange fly from the upstairs window and 2 heads moving inside. Near dark, wind dropped and the bell buoy on the lake rang once. The sound climbed the valley. Rory stepped out, looked down slope, and stood still listening. I set floods to test and waited. No one on the road. No engine noise. Stable. I wrote times in the log. At 23:12, the bell on the outer trip cracked twice. Something touched the tanglefoot at the first bend and made metal kiss rock. I cut floods and used the scope from the dark. 2 figures stood at the sign in a way that matched the kayakers and did not match them. Same clothes, wrong bodies. Heads turned too far, steps short and searching. "Evan, Rory," I called from the porch. "If you can hear and understand me, stop, say your names, and step back to the sign." They didn't speak. They moved toward the bridge in slow, messy motion, feet catching, paddles dragging. They did not react to names or tone. I stayed with the plan for nights like this. I kept distance and cover. "Stop now," I said again. "There is wire. There are traps. You move, you get hurt." They moved. I dropped the outer floods and let the inner wash snap on so glare hit their knees. The change stalled them. Evan tilted his head like a sensor-finding center. Rory stepped into the tanglefoot and went down on a knee. Stories love speeches, I don't. I made a safe decision, clean and final, because leaving them at the wire would bring more bodies and more sound. The rifle did its job at standoff. Then I moved down with mask, gloves, and tools. Cleanup is simple and ugly, distance first. Fire second, dig last. I pulled the drop sheet, set it where the slope breaks, and worked by headlamp with wind at my back. Clothing burned hot and short, lime dusted the last layer. Their camp held a blue dry bag with 2 apples, a map, and paracord. I left it under a rock. I reset lines, replaced one pan a boot had kicked, and pulled the shear bolts on the bridge to test the drop. Everything that should move, moved. Everything that should lock, locked. I slept in the chair with the radio on low. At 4, a wideband hum rode the band like weather, but not. The lake answered with the buoy once and then nothing. Dawn made the yard gray. I walked the fence and found prints I hadn't made. Toes hard in, heels soft. Stride narrow and wrong. The kayakers were the test, not the event. The event would follow water and sound, and the bridge would not be enough if the lake decided to talk again. Radio is a tool and a leash, so I set rules and power budgets before I chase range. Local first, handheld scan the valley splits and the lake edge, squelch tight, tone disabled, battery meters taped so no one trusts a lying bar. Mobile VHF/UHF lives at the desk with low gain most hours and a hot mic cover so panic can't key it by accident. For the region, I run NVIS on 40 meters with a dipole strung low between Birch's feed line, grounded, choke at the rig, tuner fixed so drift shows. 10 feet up throws a high lobe that skips cities and falls back close. It sounds like the next county without waking the coast. I keep a schedule because schedules become nets when people need them. Top of the hour, 5 after, and 30 after. Identification, radius, status in 3 words, fuel and food on separate days. Water reports every morning, road conditions at dusk. Medical requests on the quarter hour only. Everything else waits or goes local. The loop stays plain. Private site, not a clinic or pantry. Approach with notice, follow quarantine, gate closed until trust is built. Do not test the bridge. Signal once at the sign and wait. If I'm away, a timer runs the loop and a handheld beacons a low tone for human ears. I built a simple APRSI gate because packets move when voice fails. A cheap tracker whispers positions from canoe crews and snow machines when they cut the corner of my ridge. I don't publish. I log passives with time and heading and use them to set watches when a corridor heats up. Etiquette keeps the air useful. No names on open mics. Use roles or colors. Report in 3s. Status, need, risk. If you don't know, say you don't. Keep fear off the net until the end, then add tone notes. We repeat back only numbers and verbs. We do not teach on channel. I went up to old Birch and tuned the dipole after a gust shifted a knot. The steps were soft. I trimmed an inch and brought SWR down. On the way down, I mapped the spur with a handheld, marked rich spots and dead pockets, and pinned a paper card by the desk. At home, I wrote the comms SOP in large letters and taped it at eye level. If the person at the mic doesn't remember, the paper remembers. Below it, I taped a second page. Deception checks. Ask for 2 specifics from the last window. Ask for a band or tone change. Ask for the checksum word. Nico later cut it to short codes. Power discipline is the backbone. Daylight runs HF at half power unless the sky dies. Night keeps VHF in listen unless the pan rings. We do not chase a call beyond 1 hop at night. We do not turn the house into a beacon when fog lies in the valley. By sunset, the bands thinned to useful voices. A ranger called for head counts at trailheads and got one. A grocery asked for pallets no one could move. An old ham said his wife was fevered and then, steady as ever, gave me wind and barometer so I could set the stove. I logged it, cut HF, set the mobile to local, and listened to the valley breathe. Then the siren on the far shore woke on its timer, low and long, and the buoy answered, and the woods turned their heads like the lake had learned a new word. At 6:10, a woman broke squelch on the ranger pair and spoke like someone who had managed bad days. "Old Birch lookout," she said. 4 inside, 1 injured, no way down without crossing houses. She gave a bearing that matched the ridge I could see from the porch. "State ages and condition," I said. 2 adults, 1 teenager, 1 older adult, she said. Older man with a calf laceration, cleaned and wrapped, not closing right. No fever, no contact distance with the changed. Water and a stove, food thin. Names, I said. On Hattie, she said. On with me are Jonas, Nico, and Pike. One handheld spare cells, we can signal. Conserve battery, I said. Hang bright cloth on the north rail so I can confirm with optics. Stay off the stairs after dusk. I come at first light. I marked 3 routes and picked a 4th I trusted. The corduroy ran rough through wet ground, hated wheels, let a quad crawl, and kept me under cover. I packed to the list by the door. Water, tarps, blankets, stove, medkit with suture and tape, bleach, masks and gloves, rope, saw, bolt cutters, compact jack, a small battery repeater, fuel. Rifle with irons, sidearm holstered, spare magazines sealed, everything strapped twice. I set the loop to play every half hour with approach rules and quarantine spelled out. I chalked route and window, dropped hedgehogs, tied the rope, and rolled. The spur was ice and shade and soft where sun touched, so I took it slow, stood on the pegs through ruts, and killed the engine when the woods went quiet. The corduroy poles creaked and gave a rhythm I could count. The air smelled like wet wood. Half a mile out, I heard steps off my right, steady and wrong. I braked, let the quad sit, and moved on feet with the rifle low. 2 bodies walked 30 yards down slope, arms heavy, heads tilted, searching for a tone. I backed out, counted 60, and cut a long arc through Blowdown and Young Birch where nothing moves fast. The lookout stood on concrete piers with a narrow stair. A bright jacket hung from the north rail. I called from the ground. Stay inside. Talk from there. Hattie Crowell stepped into the doorway, gray hair under a cap, eyes direct. Jonas Hale stood behind her with a med pouch and steady hands. Nico Alvarez wore a pack too big and a radio taped to the strap. Rowan Pike kept a leg up, wrap stained. Protocol is simple, I said. Masks and shared air. No one touches anyone. We move in pairs. If I say stop, freeze. If I say down, find ground. Quarantine at my place is 96 hours, heat and water and food through a pass. Agree and we go. If not, I leave supplies. They agreed. Jonas peeked the wound with clean gloves and shook his head like a man who needed a stitch kit. I handed him one through the gap in a small bottle. He irrigated, closed with stitches, taped a pressure wrap, and said, he can ride. We staged the descent in 3 legs. First, we shuttled gear to the quad and lashed it low. Then Hattie and Nico walked the top trail with me to read the first bends and mark the bad footing. Last, we brought Pike down on a rope seat, Jonas behind and me below, and we stopped twice so he could breathe. At the corduroy, I parked nose out and laid pads. Pike rode strapped at 2 points that would not cut. Hattie sat behind to keep his shoulders quiet. Jonas walked left and Nico right, both within reach but hands off, and we moved on hand signals. We made time until the woods reacted to us. Branches clicked left, then ahead, then behind, like a line searching for a tone. I dropped to idle, then killed the engine. We waited. One shape stepped into the trail 10 yards ahead, coat soaked, sleeve torn. It turned its head toward us like a microphone sweeping a room. I raised my hand flat. Hold! It drifted to the rack corner and reached for the strap. I closed my hand. Prepare. Jonas slid his palm to his belt. Nico fixed on my elbow. Hattie braced her boot in mud. I let it center in open ground because open lets you decide and cover does not. And then I made the safe choice. The shot cracked, birds lifted, the trail held still. We waited. 2 more moved in the brush but did not enter our lane. We moved again. On flats, Jonas and Nico trotted and rode the rack on the climbs. Hattie kept our back trail and counted steps so we could repeat the route. At the bend above the bridge, I cut the engine and listened. The buoy rang once on the big lake and then wind shifted once. No trucks, no boots. We rolled the last grade and stopped short. Entry is a checklist you run out loud so no one improvises. Floods off, latch check. Rope across the drive reset. Pass through clear. Masks on. Eyes on me. I slid the gate, waved them in and closed. Quarantine is real, I said. 4 days, no contact. I set heat, water, food, and radios through a pass window. You follow it and we stay friends. Hattie smiled like rules fit her. Jonas exhaled and nodded. Nico stared at the antenna line like he had a project. Pike shut his eyes and grabbed the rack. I opened the outbuilding, lit the small stove, and set their first tray. I logged times and route notes, then stood on the porch and listened because dusk was due. Quarantine works when it's boring, so I kept it boring on purpose. Heat set safe, cots spaced, vent cracked, window pass-through taped with arrows so hands don't meet. A tote held masks, gloves, wipes, and a fingertip pulse ox with fresh cells. A second tote held dishes marked with paint pens and a roll of bio bags. I taped a card to the door, temperatures at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., oxygen readings after meals, fluids visible, report coughs, nausea, dizziness, or confusion. Jonas logged numbers like he'd done it on an ambulance 100 nights. Hattie checked the vent and asked for a carbon monoxide alarm. I mounted one and pushed test. Nico traced the cokes with his eyes. Pike slept. Day 1 stayed quiet. I cooked simple rice and beans, sent it through the pass, and stepped back until the tray came out empty. I set water and a marker board inside so they could ask for items without shouting. We kept radio traffic tight, 2 check-ins per day and 1 if needed, no long talk. Day 2, Pike's calf looked better, but the edges still wept. Jonas changed the wrap with clean hands and a mask and signaled for sterile gauze, a clipper, and tape. I handed them through and logged the hour. Hattie read the perimeter card I'd taped inside and quizzed me on the hedge, the trench, and the hedgehogs. Rangers keep notes. I like rangers. Night brought the mix of snow pellets and fog that Maine saves for people who want to sleep. The buoy rang once and shut up. The outer pan near the cedar clicked and settled. I watched a shape drift along the fence, pause at the wire, and move on after the steel hummed. I let the dark do the work. Day 3 had the first wobble. Nico called on the handheld and said he felt hot. The thermometer read 99.5, pulse ox 97. He drank water and said he'd slept too close to the stove. I moved cots wider, opened the vent a turn, and waited. By afternoon, he was 98.9 and steady. Jonas shook his head. I told him we'd keep the clock, not our nerves. Tests don't care how you feel, they start when they want. Near dusk, a voice keyed the ranger pair and used the lookout's name like a key. "Old Birch, this is North Fork," it said. "Need weather for the ridge. Confirm barometer and wind." The cadence was right, but the phrasing was off. Hattie raised a finger toward the radio, then toward the deception card. I nodded. "North Fork, confirm yesterday's checksum," I said. Then switch to the alt tone and repeat wind in meters per second. Silence. Then a click that tried to sound normal. Then a tone that was wrong by half a note. I logged time, killed transmit, and kept listen. At 2000, all 4 in quarantine read normal temperatures and good oxygen. Pike flexed his ankle and smiled. Nico asked for a notepad and tape to draw cable runs. I slid them through and felt a tap on the back of my neck that wasn't weather. The outer pan near the cedar rang 3 times, quick and light, like a hand that knew where to step. We cleared them on the morning of day 5. Quarantine ended with a list, not a hug. Fresh clothes, bagged bedding, wipe high touch, and hands off the pantry until counts reset. They followed each line without talk. That told me how we'd work together. I gave a tour like a safety briefing. North fence, brook gate, bridge chain, bollards by the spur, the kill funnel and why it exists, the cellar bars and why we avoid them, the radio table and what we say on air. Everyone memorized triangle signals and repeated them. 1 long weather, 2 short gate, 3 long perimeter. Assignments came next. Jonas took medical and water. Hattie took perimeter. Nico took comms and inventory. Pike, leg wrapped, took shop and fuel. I stayed on systems and decisions. Each person got 1 backup, so a missing body didn't break a job. We turned the outbuilding into a clinic. Jonas set bins by function, labeled hard, and wrote no field use on 2 rare items so panic wouldn't waste them. He built a burn can and trained glove changes with a timer. Hattie walked the fence with me and pointed where I'd missed. A deer trail cut behind the abatis and would bring feet to the wire faster than the road. We hung a line there and dropped 2 hedgehogs in grass so the lane read wrong. A post had lifted in thaw. We reset it and marked a date for recheck. Nico cut my SOP into a 5-line card, added a rotating checksum, and showed a pen mark on his thumb when I asked rotation. Pike rebuilt 2 latches, sharpened the splitter, set an edge on the draw knife, and built a long hook for moving hedgehogs. When wind rose, he walked the eaves with screws. We set a schedule with colors because clocks slip in winter. Red watched, green slept, yellow ran utilities, blue supported. The turnover hit 3 questions. What broke? What changed? What hurts? The log ends with mistakes. Names go on it, including mine. We ran 3 drills until boredom replaced nerves. Silent move, bunks to posts and socks. Blackout, lights out, radios off, passive watch, count 60 between any noise. Hard bell, 3 long on the triangle, gate pressure, flood wash, cover lanes, cellar ready but closed. Meals became maintenance windows. While pots simmered, we cleaned filters, swapped batteries, and signed for tools. Loud tools lived in a locked tote. You needed the grinder. You signed a chit and told 2 people. Hand tools first because boring beats fast. We trimmed radio language until it ran clean. Roles not names, verbs not speeches. If we said move, we moved. If we said hold, we held. Jonas watched tone. When a voice went thin, he handed that person water and sent them to sweep. The buoy on the lake set our nights. Sometimes it rang and the valley stayed quiet. Other times it rang and the woods shifted like sound had weight. We stopped guessing and started to measure. Nico built a card. Buoy count, wind, temperature, time to first fence touch. After a week, the numbers lined up enough to warn us when to cut power and stand ready. We added a quiet route for neighbors. Hattie and I flagged a high trail that bypassed the spur and gate, climbed the ridge, and dropped to a logging scar. 2 trees got reflectors you could only see from one angle. Barter began without a handshake. A voice on 40 left a culvert coordinate and said there was grain for whoever still stood. We checked. The marker was there. 3 stacked stones and a stick. We took half and left a jar of beans, 2 hooks. We tuned posture to weather. When a nor'easter brewed, we staged tarps and sand. When thaw turned ruts to soup, we posted at the bridge and stopped driving it. When clear, we cut dead limbs so fire season wouldn't climb into our eaves. People adjusted at different speeds. Nico tried to do too much until Hattie gave him a finish line job, inventory nightly and list morning pull. Pike hated standing still, so we built a wood rack to count, stack, and tie to a line. Jonas paced until I told him to own water. After that, he measured and logged. We tightened the plan where it sagged. We added a second pass-through at the gate. We moved heavy things low and common things to shoulder height. We taped LEDs that might leak, set headlamps red, hung mirrors and birches to see around bends. We wrote, spoke less, and the place began to sound like we lived here on purpose. The valley answered with 2 bad nights that proved the drills mattered. On the 3rd, something new learned our name. It started with the harbor siren on the south shore, a steady low note that belonged to fog and ferries, not empty towns. It rolled across the water just before dawn and woke the buoy, and the buoy answered in rhythm that matched the siren's pulse like a metronome no one set. We logged times and stood still. Windlight from the southeast, ice along the coves, open water in the middle. The sound left the shore, crossed the lake, climbed the valley, turned our trees into instruments. Needles shook, tin clicked, hedgehog chains sang. Hattie said, "That's sirens on a timer or a failsafe." "No one's there to shut it off," Jonas said. "Then it's a beacon." Nico penciled buoy equals 1, 2, 3 with hash marks, underlined rate, wrote faster. The first bodies came uphill in singles like yesterday's problem took a walk. They didn't march. They drifted toward the tone, angled toward anything that bounced it, and when the siren paused, they stopped and turned their heads like they'd lost the trail. When it resumed, they moved again. We cut the loop to half power and narrowed the antenna pattern north. We killed floods and kept passive watch. We closed the inner gate and set the counterweight rod where a glove can't slip. We spoke with verbs: hold, cut, check, ready. By noon, the siren had pulled a line along the old utility cut, poles, guy wires, easy grade, no fences. They followed the corridor like water in a ditch. When the cut hit our blocked road, the line pooled, then spread into the woods, then found the spur, because spurs get found by whatever wants the least work. We watched from the birches with glass and counted the rate, not the heads. Rate tells you if you can outwait. It rose. 1 every minute, then 2, then strings of 3 with space between, like the lake chose a tempo. Abatis caught clothing and slowed wrists. Tanglefoot took knees. Gabions pushed traffic toward the funnel where P-stone hisses and the choice is clear. Show yourself or leave. We didn't show. We held positions and let the math run. Pressure rose, then fell, then rose again as new sound bounced from the lake. A gull screamed and 3 turned to face it and walked into the cedar. Jonas whispered, "It's sound first, everything else later." At dusk, the siren doubled its cycle length like the fallback battery was weak. The buoy lagged, missed a beat, found it again. The line thickened because the pause let stragglers catch up and press. The gate shivered in its receiver. Bell pans rang soft and close. We stayed dark. The siren cut hard at night, not a fade but a kill. The valley went flat and quiet. The line outside didn't stop. It searched for the last tone it knew, found our yard and pushed. Then the bridge answered with a sound I had not heard since I set the shear bolts. The bridge groaned under load and told me the lane was about to wake. I had 2 ways to end that lane: drop the deck or drown the approach. The siren was dead, the line was blind, and rate was rising. I chose both. "Positions," I said. Hattie covered the funnel from the porch post. Jonas watched the inner yard. Pike clipped the hand winch lanyard to his belt. Nico stood by the sluice rope, timer set. We ran the checklist because speed fails when it forgets the order. Floods off, yard dark, radios local, counterweight clear, shear pins marked, rope path free, no feet in the arc. I set the rifle on the rail and nodded. "On green," I said. Nico drops the gate. Count 3. Pike pulls. Jonas listens for the lock. Hattie calls rate. Green. Nico yanked the gate handle. The plate rose. Water nosed left into the trench. 3 heartbeats later, Pike leaned on the winch. The chain stood tight. 1 shear bolt popped with a dry snap. The second held, then let go. The deck shifted a finger, then a fist, then fell 3 inches and jammed on the north sill. The far stringer bit rock. The deck became a wedge. Anything on it would slide into the jam and stop. Weight would add weight. At the same time, the trench ate at the bank. Clay crumbled. Stone slid. A brown tongue widened a sink the size of a washtub. The lane that looked dry became a soft mouth that punished boots and wheels. Bodies pressed to the wire at the first bend. Abatis dragged sleeves down. Tanglefoot wrapped ankles. Dragon's teeth split the flow and sent it toward the hedge and the pea-stone hiss. The funnel did its job. The bridge answered with a low grind as the jam settled. "Rate 2 per minute," Hattie said. "Holding." Jonas touched the gate latch and felt vibration through steel. Pike kept tension so the chain would not whip. Nico logged, "Buoy 0, siren 0, wind C3, bridge jam." We kept dark and spoke in verbs. Hold, cut, check, ready. The line bled into the ditch slowly, then faster as more feet found the same low spot. Water undercut gravel. A heel punched through crust, then a knee. Bodies are not heavy until they lean. Then they are. The jam made its wall without us spending another round. We had rehearsed a second step. I cracked 2 flares and pitched them into the soft ground beyond the sink where the flow wanted to go. Light draws eyes. Heat lifts scent. Pressure slid off our wire. "Rate 1, Hattie said. Dropping." We held. Nico eased the sluice. Jonas set stakes to mark the undercut. Pike locked the handle and stepped behind the bollard. The deck groaned once more and settled. The sink widened to the width of a truck. The far bank stayed clean because I had laid stone there when the water was low. The approach turned to pudding and the funnel lost interest. We stood down half a posture. We drank, checked faces, and rotated. Jonas took pulse and word count. Nico kept logging. Pike swapped gloves. Wind swung north. The buoy stayed quiet. The rate fell to 1 every 3 minutes, then stopped. 5 minutes of nothing. 10. "Hold dark," I said. No victory words. We left the deck down in the trench working slow. We reset clackers and pans, checked ropes for fray, and posted a card. Bridge manual, sluice quarter, approach undermined, do not cross. Pike wrote, "Do not cross" again in bigger letters. We walked the fence. Posts tight, pins true, hedgehogs chained, Gabions holding. The pea-stone hissed under my boots. We watched the lane that no longer existed and listened to the brook do the work we had asked of it. Only then did we speak about the next problem. The deck must stay down until we build a bypass only we can use. The trench must be armored before spring water chews to our side. "Tomorrow we lay cribbing and stack rock on fabric," Pike said. "Tomorrow," I said, "why don't we shorten the loop and swing the antenna north?" Hattie said, "Move mirror checks out." That line used the utility cut. It will again. We let the yard teach us what changed. I wrote times and actions in the log. At midnight, we took one slow walk with red light and stayed off the edge. The jam held. The sink gurgled. The woods did not answer. I slept on the floor by the door in boots. The radio stayed on local with squelch tight. At 2:43, a voice brushed HF like a moth on glass and said a name I do not speak on air. It was mine. The nor'easter came in gray. Snow became ice, then rain, then back to ice that glued to every edge. By dawn, the dipole sagged and the tuner wouldn't hold a match. NVIS went deaf when we needed close ears most. We cut power and went outside with hoods. Ice shelled the birches and locked guy lines. The feed point hung lower than my shoulder. Nico scraped the cokes and showed a white rind that cracked. "SWR's a kite," he said. The meter agreed. We ran the storm plan. Jonas checked roof loads and cleared flues. Hattie walked the fence, knocked ice off wire where weight bowed it, and tapped posts to hear which ones had shifted. Pike set wind guards on the generator and warmed oil with a shop light so the start wouldn't drink a whole hour of fuel. Fixing antennas in weather writes rules in bone. De-ice first, retention second, splice only if the meter still lies. Nico belayed from the stair rail. I climbed the lookout tower, 3 points, hammer looped, tape on carabiners so metal wouldn't bite skin. At the platform, the lake looked like pewter. The Sirens stood dead in fog. The center insulator had filled with ice and pulled the legs unevenly. I cracked the shell with the hammer's wooden handle and fed warm cloth into the slot to thaw the last bridge. The line lifted an inch, then 2. The coax jacket had split a thumbnail at the bend. Water had crept under the boot where tape was lazy. I cut the bad inch, bared braid in center, soldered a short pigtail, then used a rat tail splice to get length back without changing the leg. Heat shrink sealed the joint. I wrapped friction tape and slid a new weather boot. No bear. I raised the feed point and took slack out of both legs, one hand on the line, one on the rail. "Test," Nico called. I keyed a handheld on a dummy load and counted 5. He matched and logged. Back on the deck, the meter settled. SWR fell to a number the tuner liked. The rig loaded at half power without complaint. First call out was weather. Wind 20 from the east, gusts 32, barometer dropping, freezing rain to sleet by night. A voice west of the ridge read back the same. Good enough. We spent the day clearing weight. Hattie flatted ice from concertina, gentle, no slices. Jonas bled air from the hydro line so ice wouldn't shatter the intake screen. Pike braced the gate track and checked the counterweight cavity for water. Nico shortened the loop to 1 line per hour and swung the pattern north. Fuel dropped faster than I liked. We set the generator to 30-minute cycles and let batteries ride lower. Headlamps red, LEDs taped, no chargers left plugged. A kettle rode the stove to keep the air wet. At dusk, the storm thickened. The buoy stayed mute. The woods ticked. The dipole held shape and the match stayed true. We ate rice and fish and wrote the log by hand. Last line read simple. Antenna up, match good, fence tight, Fuel fair. Then the ranger pair opened with a voice we didn't know and a set of coordinates too close to be random. We caught the coordinates twice and mapped them on the wall. A cabin on a north spur 1 kilometer above the utility cut, close enough for our mirror to catch a flicker if the trees thinned. The voice said 2 children inside and something long moving along the poles like beads on a wire. It matched the corridor we had watched fill. "Posture, Amber," I said. "Quiet first, then move." We killed spill light, taped the last LED, and covered the stove glass with blackened tin. Radios went to local. HF stayed dark. We pulled boots and moved in socks. Pike checked the bridge jam by feel and came back with wet gloves and a nod. Hattie posted at the porch rail with the scope. Jonas set the med tote by the cellar door and took blankets. Nico clipped the timer to his sleeve. The first contacts sounded like snow snakes in the birch. A branch shook where nothing should shake. The outer pan by the cedar rang once, then nothing, then once again like a finger that knew where to press. I lifted a hand. Hold. The bell buoy on the lake stayed mute, which made every other sound larger. Rate built in pairs, then trios. They came on the utility cut and slowed at the slide because the easy line was gone. They spilled into timber and found the spur by error and habit. They hit the abatis wall and leaned, tanglefoot wrapped ankles, concertina touched knees, and then the pea stone hissed and told us a body had entered the funnel. We held to the drill and stayed dark. Pressure at the gate grew in pulses like surf. The latch rattled once, twice. The bar held. The counterweight rail hummed. The grid bowed and returned. We did not speak except to mark verbs. Hold. Ready. Breathe. 2 on the right post, Hattie whispered. 3 more behind them. Rate 5 per minute. I watched the skyline through the upstairs slot and saw only sleet. Steel sang low, then stopped. A hand found the smooth wire and slid off. A boot found the trench lip and whispered on stone. The bell pans answered soft and mean. We let the fence work until the 3rd pulse hit and the grid shivered hard enough to nudge the latch pin. That is the line in the checklist. Retreat inside, I said. Order 1. Order 1 is not panic. It is steps you can count in the dark. Floods off. Inner gate locks. Outer door closes. Cellar bars drop. Generator check. Air monitor on. Timer set. Count oxygen every 10 minutes until rate falls. We moved to it without drama. Hattie last. Pike first. Jonas mid. Nico on the switchboard. Me at the foot of the stairs with the rifle and the log. In the cellar, concrete made its own weather. The generator thumped through the wall. The CO monitor read safe and the O2 meter read 19.8. We sat on crates and boots, not chairs. Above us, the bell pans kept time like a hollow clock. Sometimes 1 rang, sometimes 3 at a scrape, sometimes none for a minute that felt like a trick. Hattie touched the rebar once and felt vibration. Grid's loaded, she said. The radio stayed local and closed. HF stayed dark. We did not call the coordinates because we had nothing to give but noise. Nico marked minutes with a pencil tap so no one needed a voice to know time was moving. At 40 minutes, the rate eased. The bell pans rang less. The latch pin stopped kissing steel. I wrote it down and kept my voice the same as the first minute. Hold posture. No peaks. The plan forbids curiosity in the first hour. A scrape at the vent stopped us cold. It came from the diesel room, metal on concrete, a drag, a pause. Pike lifted a finger. I shook my head. The vent draws across the tanks. Opening it dumps smell into our heads and gives the outside a sound to follow. We listened until the noise ended and did not return. At 1:30, we cut the generator and let batteries carry. The cellar went still. You could hear sleet hit the bulkhead like sand. Pressure eased. 2:05, then 2:20. The pan stopped. The rebar cooled. I let 5 more minutes go by because the plan demands overrun. Order 2, I said. Crack to utility room. Order 2 is the careful open. 1 latch. Wait. 2nd latch. Wait. Door to the hall. Wait. We cleared to the kitchen with masks on and eyes at the corners. The porch window showed yard dark and quiet. The grid stood bowed and still, frost on steel, no motion. The sink by the bridge gurgled in sleet. The lake was gray. We did not say safe, we said stable. We rotated posts and fixed what the dark bent. Pike reset a pin in the latch and checked the counterweight well for ice. Hattie walked the inner path and righted a pan the weight had kicked. Nico shortened the loop and set a narrow beam north. Jonas made tea. Then the ranger pair spoke again with the same coordinates and a detail that cut cold. The woman said she had seen our floods flash once through the trees at the height of the pressure, and that the line had turned its heads at the same second. And that if we were going to move anyone from her ridge, we would need to use water, not road, because the road had learned us. I underlined 3 words in the log: water at dawn. Morning put ice on every branch. We kept to socks and hand signals, packed light, and moved to the canoe cache in the alder. No buoy, no siren, only sleet that made rings. We pushed off with 2 paddles and a spare. Hattie sat bow, I sat stern. Jonas watched the shore from the middle with binoculars in a dry bag. Nico and Pike stayed home to guard the yard and keep the loop short. We cut along reeds, kept the hull on shadow. Quiet routes are lanes you borrow and don't own. We used the reed wall, a beaver channel, and a rock line under gray water that breaks wake. No bright gear, no chatter, no lights. The canoe moved on muscle and habit, stayed low. We made the culvert by a spruce snag and a rock pile shaped like a seat, 3 stones and a stick. The marker matched. We beached, set the canoe on brush, and took positions. Hattie watched the cut. I rolled snow back with a stick and found packed leaves in a sealed tote. On the lid a note: for whoever still stands. We took half: rice, beans, salt, a candle stub, and left jerky hooks and a sharpener. We wrote a return note: still standing West Ridge, quiet route marked, leave weight for weight. We stacked the seal, brushed snow, and walked our prints with a cedar bough until the path looked like wind. Back on water, we scouted a second lane. A thin channel through drowned timber, one hand on paddle, the other on the gunwale to keep trim. A loon called once to the east and didn't wait for an answer. At home, we hid the canoe and logged the route in pencil, not ink. Nico added 2 reflector codes that only show at 10 degrees. Pike built braces for a second rack. Jonas marked ration bands green, yellow, and red. By dusk, the lake held its breath again, and the radio carried a voice that knew our names and hours and asked us to open the gate now, not later. We did not open the gate. We closed radios, checked the checklist, and let the voice talk to itself. Deception likes urgency. Our rules don't. We cooked, drank water, and reset lines. Then we wrote the last piece this place needed, the manifest. Rules keep people steady when nerves don't. These are ours. Clean, short, tested. We start and end with numbers. Battery, fuel, water, food, weather, band notes. Write them, sign them, read them aloud to the next watch. 2 eyes own the day. We design for failure, then rehearse for calm. If it breaks, we run the fallback. If the fallback creaks, we write a new one and make it hold. We do not improvise when tired. We follow the line. We keep distance. Masks for strangers, gloves for work, quarantine for 96 hours, no exceptions. Food and water go through a pass. If the rules feel cold, warm your hands, not the policy. We control lanes. Roads lie, water tells the truth. The bridge stays down until we build our own bypass. The trench keeps eating and we armor it when the sky clears. We do not lend our roots to noise. We treat radio as a tool, not a stage. Report in 3. Status, need, risk. Roles, not names. Checksums before favors. If fear wants the mic, drink water and write first. We keep the fence hard and the house quiet, wire low, wire high, hedgehogs chained, Gabions tight, trench reset, bell pans live. We do not chase shadows with light. We carry our share. Each job has a backup. Loud tools sign out. A clean hook is a promise you kept to your future self. We trade fair. Culvert caches take weight and give weight. Quiet routes get markers for friends, not crowds. If you borrow, leave a note. If you stand, stand for someone you might never meet. We speak with verbs: hold, cut, check ready, and we do the thing the word points at. We do not say safe, we say stable. We do not count heads at the wire, we count rate. We do not brag the morning after, we fix the bent post and reset the pin. If you reach this ridge and want shelter, announce early and follow the line. Do not test the gate, stay out of the funnel. If you need a box at the sign, say so. We will set it down and step back. If you want in, accept quarantine and work. My name is Asher Holt. This is the log of a forest cabin that learned how to hold. If you can hear this, the loop will run at the top of the hour. If the bank is low, it will skip once and come back. If it does not come back, we are out on a quiet route, or the storm has us busy, or the dipole is ice and we're on the tower. If you found value here, subscribe, leave a comment with where you're listening from, and share this with someone who needs a plan more than a pep talk. More stories are coming. Keep your lights low, your route simple, and your rules short. The gate stays closed until quarantine is complete. The work doesn't. Stay sharp. Watch the weather tonight.